Jason, we're pulling into Emulation Station.
Dude.
This is not a new segment, but I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist it. Here we are. We've left Rumor Roundup, we got on the train, and now we're in Emulation Station. This has been undoubtedly the biggest news story of the week. We spoke about it a little bit last week, that emulators were starting to appear in the App Store and mysteriously disappearing. But we were waiting for something that did happen, which is Riley Tested's Delta emulator is launched worldwide and in the new Alt Store PAL in Europe. The first app marketplace has arrived. Really, which is kind of interesting, the week that the first app marketplace arrives, which we've been talking about for months now, that's not the news. The news is Delta, which is really interesting. Couple of pieces of information for this. So as I said, if you are in Europe, you can get Delta through Alt Store PAL. It's not in the App Store. If you're outside of Europe, you can get Delta from the App Store. Worldwide, Delta has been either number 1 or number 2 app in the whole of the App Store every single day since it launched on Wednesday. Here in the UK, it's only been eclipsed by the London Marathon app because the London Marathon was yesterday. In the first 2 days, Riley posted on Mastodon that the app had received 1.4 million downloads. So I'm expecting it's probably somewhere between 5 to 15 million downloads now, which is unbelievable. It's completely free. I said to Riley on Mastodon, you should have some kind of paid component for this app. And he reminded me we have a Patreon, which I loved as an answer. And I was like, you know what? Fair enough. But still, Riley, at least premium themes and app icons. Come on, let's
in-app
get
purchase
this done.
for icons and themes or something, just to let people throw money at it a little bit. Yeah.
And we'll get back to Delta and AltStar in a second, but just to kind of talk about emulators, there are more established emulators on the way. So there is an emulator called Provenance, which is an emulator that can run systems that Delta can, so a lot of the old handheld Nintendo systems, but also the Provenance emulator on other platforms runs Sony PlayStation games, GameCube games, and others. It's going to be interesting to see exactly which systems are going to run in Provenance, because the Dolphin GameCube emulator, they have said that they cannot run on the iPhone, as Apple does not allow for just-in-time compilation on the iPhone, aka JIT. This is needed for Dolphin to achieve the performance required to run these games. For one of the developers on the iOS project, they said the GameCube and Wii have a PowerPC-based CPU inside them. That's just funny to me, with the history of the Mac. All modern all modern Apple devices use an ARM-based CPU. It isn't possible to directly run PowerPC code on an ARM CPU and vice versa. We submitted a DMA interoperability request to Apple for JIT support, but it was denied. So I don't know how many more systems will actually appear, right? So a lot of the handheld Game Boy, Nintendo DS, that kind of stuff, that's all there in Delta, and I'm sure is going to be in Provenance. Will we get PlayStation games, PSP games, GameCube games? That we don't know yet.
Right.
Have you spent any time with Delta at all?
I opened Kirby Pinball and made all the beeps and boops, and my wife looked at me and was like, what is happening? And I said, sorry. And I closed it, and that's been about it.
Okay.
It's not I am of a generation where we got the first video game home systems. So that was, for me, it's the Atari 2600, or maybe, people had the Odyssey or the Intellivision. And then I got into computers, and I didn't buy a game console again until the 90s, when I got a PS1. So this whole generation in between has no nostalgia for me. So I would love a PS1 emulator, because I'd be playing NFL Blitz 2000 on that all the time. But until then, it's of less interest to me, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I completely understand that. I kind of thought that you would probably have checked it out for professional curiosity.
I checked it
but
out.
You weren't going to be spending
Sure,
a
I
lot
did.
of
And
time.
that's the question about the 1.4 million downloads is how much of that is, I heard about this, I'll check it out, and how much of that is people who are actually going to use it. We don't know.
Well, I can count myself amongst the have been using it. I think I've played about 15 hours of Pokemon over the last 4 or 5 days. Delta is incredible. I've tried a lot of emulators over the years on Android phones and stuff like that, and it really is superbly done. One of the things that I was very surprised about is like it has a save syncing system with Dropbox. So like today,
So smart.
I was using the Delta iPhone app in compatibility mode on my Vision Pro with a Sony PlayStation controller, playing Pokemon, and then was able to pick it up on my iPhone and continue. Like, it's so well thought out. At the moment, it is only on the iPhone now, which is intriguing because Delta does run on other systems. Like if you're on the Patreon and you'd used like the old Alt Store, or you were on the Test Flight, which is how Delta has run for years, there is an iPad app. So like, I don't know what their plan is. My hope would be maybe that's a paid upgrade, right? Like you get it on other systems and stuff like that. So I don't know what their plan is. But I mean, if you're playing Game Boy games, using it in compatibility mode is totally fine because like these are tiny, like actual tiny games anyway, so it works great. And at the moment, everything is seemingly fine. The question I have is, and I do wonder, the risk element of all of this. Like, will the success of Delta draw the ire from Nintendo and Sony and others? Like, the legality of emulation is messy. There doesn't really seem to be an agreed upon, like, convincing, and there are a lot of laws that people throw around, I understand, but it doesn't stop companies like Nintendo from shutting this stuff down, and they have done that in the past. It's going to be really intriguing to see what happens. Like, well, is everyone just going to let this go still? Is there a level that it gets to? Are Apple actually going to do something about, do they have a rule about what retro means and they won't accept games past a certain level if they even can run on the iPhone? Maybe that's why they don't offer just-in-time compilation, because it will stop more modern systems from being able to run. Like, I'm not sure about the answers to these questions, but I do wonder if they're going to try and do something, because they could just send a scary letter to Riley, like, which is what Nintendo has done before to other companies.
I think the question is like what the laws are and what's allowed. And I feel, as a non-lawyer, I feel the same about this as I do about ripping DVDs that you own, which is, if you sell me games and then you stop making a device and it dies and I still want to play the games and you're like, too bad. Like, I should be able to play those games. I should find a way to do it. So it feels to me like in the spirit of the Betamax ruling, which was about place shifting, recording things off of a VCR, and that I have a personal license to that particular medium. But I could also see an argument made by a game console manufacturer that the console or the emulator itself is containing, to be compatible, it has to contain details of the platform that the platform owner believes are copyrightable and that they own. I'm not sure the law is on their side there, although that wouldn't stop a giant company from threatening and saber rattling and maybe forcing expensive litigation. But I keep coming back to the fact that if there are legal ways to let legal owners of cartridges, for example, dump the ROMs from their devices and put them on this system, that they should be allowed to do so, right? That as long as there's a legal way, you can't outlaw it. Be like nothing. The example that I've been using is you can put a pirated book in iBooks or Apple Books, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. You can put a pirated book in there. You can play a pirated movie on your Mac or on your iPad. You can do that. But just because you can doesn't mean that they can't be allowed, because there are plenty of legitimate uses for playing video files or loading in EPUBs. So I think this holds for this too, personally, which is John Voorhees wrote a story that I feel like was designed for people to point to during debates about this, which I love, which is here is a USB device that you could put a cartridge in, and it dumps it to a file on your Mac, and then you can use it on an emulator.
Yep.
And the whole point of it is not just it's news you can use. If you've got a bunch of these cartridges, you can buy this device and then put all of your, all your saves and all of the device data on an emulator. But it's also to say, here is a legitimate use of emulators that is not about piracy. Because there's the whole idea of these are old games nobody cares about from a business standpoint, and they may be locked in copyright prison where nobody knows who has the rights to them, so they're completely lost forever. And I'm sympathetic to that, absolutely. But there's also the more specific argument, which is, I have the game, here it is, I'm going to use some technology to put it on a device, and then I'm going to play it, and that you can't prevent me from doing this, that I believe is absolutely moral. If so is that legal?
Yeah.
Will somebody try it? I would hope that if somebody if one of these console makers so objected to this that they attacked, and the Yuzu example, that emulator is a different example, I think, but some of these older consoles that are long gone, I think I would hope that some organizations would come to the defense of the makers of those projects, because it's a bad precedent to set that it's impossible to emulate old devices, because they want to be they have the right, that Nintendo has the right to prevent anybody from ever playing a Game Boy game again.
Well, there's a couple of things in this. Obviously, I think of this from the Nintendo examples because it's this company that I'm most familiar with, how they work and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you're right. The Yuzu thing, I thought that they were within their rights to do that. It was emulation of the Switch, which seems madness to me, why they couldn't allow that.
Yeah.
I don't think, because as well, it was just piracy mainly that people were doing rather than
And there's
emulation.
always that element here, right? But it's not just that element. And you can tip over into that. That's why I like John's story, because he's like, this is not piracy. This is not.
I have that thing too, the GB operator. It's cool. And I believe that you should be able to emulate a game if you own it. I don't see, like you said, I think that is perfectly valid. Why not? I already own this. I've given you the money. Here we go. This is fine. The issue with Nintendo, though, is a lot of the games that people want to emulate, they're not lost. Nintendo still sell them.
I know.
You can get a lot of these on the Switch, so it becomes a little bit more complicated to say that I want to play Mario 3 it can't be lost to time.
So this is my thought about that. Why some of these arguments need to not be made, which is the argument that I want to play a game that's lost forever. I am sympathetic to that from a history standpoint. There are lots of games out there that nobody cares about, that maybe you care about. But the truth is that Nintendo, I wish they were better stewards of this, because emulation would be a lot less of an issue if they were better stewards of this and let you play games on their current consoles. And there are some, but there are others that are not available on current consoles.
For sure.
The problem
including
is,
the Pokemon games, that they don't have those.
Right. I don't like the idea that saying, well, you can play this on the current Switch, so buy a Switch and then buy the game again on the Switch. And you're just getting what you got before that you already have in a cartridge. And that's what I have a problem with, is Nintendo should be making these available and saying, well, our business is that we put the work in to build this emulator and validate all of these things that we own. And people who want the convenience of buying it can buy it and they can play it. And isn't that great? But if I own that game, I mean, it's not a remaster or anything. It's not a new thing. It's literally the thing that I own. My argument is, no, I'm not buying it again for your new console. I don't want to do that. I just want to play it. And again, I don't know if that's legal, but that would be my moral argument, is it's great. I want everybody who makes hardware to make available all the stuff they used to have. But the problem is, some of it they can never make available. Here's a tangent.
Yeah.
I just got a book last week in the mail from Amazon. I pre-ordered it like 6 months ago. It is my favorite comic book of all time.
Okay.
It's called The Micronauts. It came out in the 70s. It is my favorite comic book of all time. It has been out of print since it was printed. And the reason is it's a licensed comic book. It's not a Marvel comic. It's a Marvel comic with Marvel characters that also contains licensed toys owned by the Mego Corporation, which is now part of Hasbro. And so it went out of print forever. And could you download digital scans of those issues? Sure you could. Do I have the originals? Sure I do. But my point here is saying a lot of stuff is never going to be available because it was a license that was made. Nintendo was like, yeah, Pokemon. We'll do Pokemon and we'll license it from the people who own Pokemon. And the license drops and like they can't. Whenever the license drops, it's gone. Like you can't do it anymore. It's like how I can still play Carcassonne by by Code Monkeys. Is that who did Carcassonne? But that's because I bought it like 10 years ago on the iPad. But like there's a Carcassonne in the App Store now, and it's not that game because they lost the license.
Sometimes it's like music that's in the game is the problem. Like even there are games that they're like kind of lost to time because no one can agree the rights on the music again.
It's true for movies and TV shows, but it's really bad for code, especially code from the early days. Like, I really believe that one of the reasons Apple doesn't just say, here's an Apple II emulator, like, here's all the source code for the Apple II, go to town. I mean, I know they did it to the Lisa, but they did it to the Lisa in the Computer History Museum. And, like, the danger is you're still a big corporation with lots of money, and if there's, like, a library that was written by somebody and licensed to you in 1979 as Apple, and nobody remembers it and nobody knows that it's there, but the person who owns the rights to the company that had that library is still alive, or their heirs are still alive, or they sold that license to someone else, they could sue Apple for distributing Apple IIe system software from the 80s because it contains an esoteric thing that nobody knew was there. And the fact is, they would be in the right if they own the license to that. But nobody knows. And as a result, there's paralysis, right? Where people are just like, we can't clear this. We don't know. So that's the value of being able to go, like, you could go on eBay and buy old issues of the Micronauts, right? Like, they're not destroying the stuff that's out there. Well, a Game Boy cartridge is that, right? Which is, I have the thing. And I know it's not, you don't own the game, you own a license to the game, but I do think that if you've got a physical cartridge, you should be allowed to play that.
Yep, I agree. Well, I think we're very aligned here. The moral stance is
so.
one, but the legal stance is untested.
Right, because I don't know the legality. I know that there's some, and then there was like the Java Oracle case too that might even come to play here. But like there's some thought that like if there's software in the emulator that is doing some very specific things to emulate the hardware in a way that is actually containing things that the console maker could exert are their controlled intellectual property in some way.
Well,
I could see
Delta
it, but it
is
seems like
interesting because for the Nintendo DS emulation in Delta, you have to provide your own BIOS files. Now, where you get those, who could tell?
You can dump them from your hardware, but you can also just download them on the internet. Well, I mean, I have an Apple II emulator, and it is running with a ROM file that you have to supply, and the ROM file is not the file from my Apple II. I could have dumped the ROM from my Apple II, but you know what? I didn't bother. I just got one off the internet. But, I feel like I'm in the moral right here because I've got one right behind me. And also the Apple II, who cares, is another argument I would make. Like, just let it. If I want to play Choplifter, if I want to play Karateka, so be it. You should let me do that.
You know what, Jason? No one's going to stop you from playing these games.
Well,
no one should. Or maybe somebody should stop you.
Well, I mean, I'll just put it out there. What happens if somebody puts an Apple II game emulator on the store? Is that not a retro console because it's also a computer and you can put
can't wait
other
to
software
see
on that?
How far it could end up going. like in that.
Right.
Why can't I emulate classic Mac now too? Why not?
Well, that was so. That's one of the thoughts that I had. Is there are a lot of great classic Mac games? There are a lot of great classic iPhone games from the early days of the iPhone that you could probably play
Flight
on a
control,
modern
baby.
iPhone
Let's
in
go.
emulation. And so, like, I know that Apple's paying developers to put up, new versions and recompile them and all of that. But wouldn't it be amazing if Apple just opened the gates to a whole bunch of old, no longer compatible with the iPhone games just by saying, "Oh yeah, iOS whatever future version now contains an emulator for older versions of iOS, so those apps just continue to run." Like, that would be amazing, right? Like, you could totally do that if you wanted to. But I think that there's some challenges with, I don't know. I'm skeptical that Apple would ever allow somebody to put a Newton emulator or an Apple II emulator or a Mac emulator in the store. They're like, no, it's not a console. It's like, guys, come on.
Gotta say though, Jason, we didn't think this would happen either. We're in uncharted waters. Darren wrote in to say this is an interesting wrinkle for me. As someone in the European Union, Delta isn't actually available in the App Store. If I want to get Delta, I need to subscribe to AltStore and pay the €1.50 plus VAT a year, or go to the side-loading route via the Mac. So Europeans are disadvantaged. Thanks, EU. Okay, this is kind of interesting. I looked through some posts that Riley was putting
Apple's
online to talk about this. So
turns out,
effectively, they don't have a choice about this if they want to make AltStore. They accepted the terms, so that's the end of it. Because they accepted the terms, and they accepted the terms before the terms allow for that one-time switchback, wouldn't have made a difference anyway, but because they've done that, they want to be an alternative app marketplace, people. Any app that they release is now going to pay the CTF. So they need a way to do that. So to pay the core technology fee, they need to offer it through AltStore and charge you €1.50 a year for that, so they can cover it. But AltStore has other free apps that you otherwise can't get, and there's going to be other benefits that non-EU citizens will never get. Like there's that clipboard manager that Federico was trying out and freaking out about because it was so cool.
Right.
Those things are going to be in AltStore. So yes, you pay €1.50. I wish I could pay Riley €1.50 a year for this application, to be honest, because Delta is that good. So yes, in a way, you have to pay, but you do get access to other stuff.
I think if Riley had known everything up front, he might have made a slightly different choice.
Yeah.
Because I think that the way you would do this is you would put Delta in a different company and let Delta have its own account and put it available on the App Store for free worldwide. Then again,
I think
Riley may be approaching this as a way to get people to use the App Store or the Old Store. Right?
So someone asked Riley this, and he said if we made another developer account and put Delta on it, Apple could terminate it and our main one for violating the terms of service.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm just saying that there might have been a way to
there may have been
let somebody license
Delta
and put it up, or like they might have been able to do something like that. But I think the point is, in the EU, what they're trying to do is he's trying to use Delta and the clipboard manager and some other stuff to bootstrap AltStore.
Yep.
Like that's the goal here. And I know that stinks, but the CTF means this is how it has to be. It also means that in any other country or region where laws change to create alternative app stores or sideloading, and therefore the CTF comes into account, it will be a decision point for Delta about whether they enter in those regions and go to the CTF route, or they just stay with it free in the App Store.
So just a fun little wrinkle on that one, but AltStore does seem cool. I do wish I could get it, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they are allowing, because remember there's this, like, Apple still sort of has to approve your app because you've got to submit it and it's got to get notarized. That something like that clipboard manager, which is operating and would never have been allowed in the App Store, has been allowed to run.
Yep.
But apparently the emulators that use a JIT, even though that they made a DMA petition, Apple rejected it.
Yep.
So the emulators that use a JIT are not allowed.
Yep. It's weird, right?
That's weird to me,
and
right?
It's because that clipboard manager, it is effectively abusing an API.
A public API, not a private API.
Yeah.
The private APIs are where it's not allowed, and no JITs is a rule that Apple has.
And so it seems
again,
if you
I'm
can,
skeptical.
If you
that,
can
that,
twist a
yeah.
public API to do what you want, they maybe don't have grounds to reject you.
Yeah.
It's what,
I don't
is
love.
what I expect's happening.
I don't love this narrow interpretation of the rules, and I feel like there may be some more challenges there. We'll see where the EC might say, like, no, Apple, that's not good.
Yeah.
You need to give them the freedom to do that.
Especially because JIT is now available on iOS because of the browsers. Now, I know that there are security risks around it, but it's not like this can't happen on the iPhone because it now does. So we'll see. We'll see.
And you throw up, I hate to say this, but throw up another warning dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Throw up a warning dialogue that says this app contains a just-in-time compiler and Apple can't verify the code that gets compiled.
Make me go enable a developer tools setting or whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, which is kind of, you have to do a lot of this nonsense to even get Alt Store running anyway still. Like, you have to go to settings and tick a box and all that kind of stuff. Let me do it. I want to do it.
But it's against the spirit
of games.
Yeah, well, and I want to play PS1 games. It's against the spirit of what the EC is trying to do, to have it be Apple still doesn't want you to run that kind of emulator. And I hate it. And I wish that was not the case worldwide, right? Because, again, I want to play NFL Blitz 2000 on my iPad.
Well, yeah, but this is it. Like, don't forget, like, the EU have said that they're not in accordance with the DMA. So who knows where this is still going to go.
Sure. It just may not help you and me.
I know. Well, you never know, right? Because
you never know.
The whole thing about this, the reason they changed this emulator rule is because they knew how popular Delta was going to be, and they were right. And I guess Apple is also kind of hoping that maybe Riley will put some kind of payment thing in there, because then they get the benefit too, right? Because now the most popular app in the world right now, in the sense of being newly downloaded, is Delta. And so Apple knew that, they were going to be... There would be Europeans, I guess they've done it anyway, but people would be going wild to try and get this stuff, so they've enabled it in the App Store.